In the winter season, when it is snowing everywhere, a family of 4 is traveling through the area after getting briefly lost and asking another driver for directions. They stop at a campground for the night. Unfortunately, the ceiling in the kitchen caved in from the snow, so the campground is closed. The family decides to stay at that place anyway because they can't travel further in the snow. The father steps away from the campsite to get water, and he hears his wife crying out. There's an ominous-looking figure looming over her with a knife as she begs for her life. So her husband jumps at her attacker and yells for her to run. She races back to their van and tries to drive away with their boys, Muwon and Muchi, but the van won't start. She tries again and again but fails. Meanwhile, Mom spots her attacker walking their way, so she pushes the boys down to hide. She tells Muwon, the elder boy, to hide with Muchi in a hidden cupboard and to protect his little brother no matter what he hears. Then, after uttering a small but fervent prayer, she goes out into the night. The boys hide, but moments later, the attacker reaches the van and tries to break in. Mom distracts him and leads him away from the van, only to get caught and stabbed several times. Despite her best efforts, the attacker quickly disables her and heads back to the van, where the boys are now out of hiding and screaming for their mother. Muwon locks Lil Muchi into a suitcase and shoves it under a bench, then tries to hide himself. The attacker comes inside the van, finds Muchi's suitcase first, and starts to break it open, remembering his promise to protect his little brother. Muwon comes out of hiding and tries to lead the attacker out of the van, but he's caught, and the attacker hits him over and over with his hammer. In the meantime, police mobiles come there, so the little brother Moonwon is saved, but the attacker runs away before being captured. Later that night, Detective Park Do-suk is called to the hospital to talk to young Muchi, who is in deep shock. Both of his parents were murdered, and Muwon is gravely hurt and in surgery. Detective Park, whose own daughter was taken by the headhunter years ago, tries to get Muchi to say whether he saw the killer's face. When Muchi can't speak, he yells at the little boy and scares him even worse. As he's being pulled away, Muchi sees something that makes him scream. He points at a picture on the wall and yells that it's him. He had seen the face of the killer earlier when he was being attacked and locked in the suitcase. It's a doctor from that hospital whose picture is on a poster on the wall of that hospital, who Moonwon has seen now and identified as the attacker. After that, the police come straight to the house of Dr. Seo-jun to arrest him. Detective Park orders the house searched and arrests Seo-jun at gunpoint, growling that he's the notorious headhunter according to the identification of Muchi. While Detective Park was getting the search warrant, Muchi grabbed a scalpel from an accidentally discarded surgical tray and hid himself in the patrol car. Now, in confusion, he came out of the car and slashed Seo-jun in the face, who was standing there handcuffed. He tries to stab Seo-jun again, but Detective Park stops him, knocking the head off one of the snowmen beside him in the process. The snowman's head smashes to the ground, and inside is a black plastic bag. One of the cops looks inside, then drops it in horror. Muchi sees blood in the snow and the beret his mother was wearing, still clipped around a lock of her hair. From inside, Seo-jun's wife, Ji-eun, sees the scene, and the truth hits her like a ton of bricks. It was the head of Muchi's mother packed in a plastic bag and hid in the snowmen. Eventually, the bodies of Muchi's parents are found in Ji-eun's greenhouse, furthering the theory that Seo-jun is the headhunter. To the dismay of the families of the deceased, Seo-jun continues to protest his innocence in front of the public and wishes for the real killer to be found. He claims that he doesn't know how those bodies are in his greenhouse. But during the press conference, Ji comes there. She confronts Seo-jun in front of reporters, saying that she knows it's him. She saw him putting the head on the snowman that contained his victim's head, and she even had a picture as proof. Ji-eun asks him tearfully why he even married her if he couldn't love her, and Seo-jun sneers, saying that he wanted an offspring from Ji, and that's why he married her. Professor Daniel, who is an old friend of Dr. Seo-jun, is also there. He is also stunned by how his friend turned out. Daniel grabs Seo-jun and flings him into an interrogation room to ask if Seo-jun killed his sister in the past. Seo-jun says emotionlessly that on that day, she still hid from him after being stabbed 20 times, so he threatened to kill her mother and Daniel if she didn't come out. He actually laughs at the memory of how she looked when she crawled to him. Eventually, he confesses that he killed her mercilessly. He snarls that he did it because she killed his baby, then brags that he kept his promise not to hurt her family. He finishes his story leaving Daniel sobbing on his knees. Later, Daniel offers to run his genetic test on Ji-hoon's unborn baby, and she takes him up on it. Daniel is a professor who has been doing research for 15 years and came up with a method to detect the psychopath gene in humans. He believes that, through his research, the nation can get rid of psychopaths before they are born. According to his research, 99% of babies with psychopath genes become psychopaths, but 1% can also become geniuses in the future when the results come back. Ji-hoon can tell from Daniel's expression that her baby has the psychopath gene. She freaks out and shrieks for an abortion, unwilling to bet on the chances that her baby is that 1% who's a genius. But Daniel calmly reminds her that she has passed the months of abortion and now there is no way but to let the baby come into the world now. The scene shifts to a little boy named Jae-hoon, who has a fascination with rats. He catches one to take to the zoo and then sets it free in the snake enclosure. The fight between Snake and Mouse threatens all the other children, but this little boy is enjoying it, watching and standing there. When Jae-hoon is older, his teacher becomes worried for his mental health when he kills the class rabbit. He says that he wasn't trying to kill it, he only wanted to see if it had gained weight or was pregnant. He scratches his arm to shreds, and when his teacher asks why, Jae-hoon blandly says that he is annoyed at the other kids but can't take it out on them. The teacher calls in Jae-hoon's stepfather, and she tells him that a recent IQ test puts Jae-hoon well above genius level, but that she's worried about his mental state. She recommends therapy. But stepdad takes offense and doesn't let her do the therapy. He drags Jae-hoon into an alley after school and slaps him hard, then calls his mother to complain that Jae-hoon humiliated him. It's Ji-hoon's son with the psychopath gene. Jae-hoon now has 2 younger siblings, a brother and a sister. At home, Jae-hoon is often beaten by his stepfather for doing things that he doesn't like pouring ammonia into the fish tank. He even killed the dog of his stepfather and tried to kill his siblings. When his stepdad learns about these doings, he finds Jae-hoon and drags him home to beat him, calling him an evil bastard. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon also comes there. She shoves Jae-hoon to the ground and starts to choke Jae-hoon, telling him to die. Monsters like him need to die. She wishes that she never should have given birth to him. After giving birth to Jae-hoon, Ji-hoon left him, and he has been living with his adopted family. Soon, we see that the whole family is killed, and Jae-hoon is the only survivor. After that, Jae-hoon is brought in for questioning as the prime suspect in his family's murder. He has no reaction to a photo of 3 covered corpses and claims that he didn't kill them. The polygraph machine detects it as the truth, so he's released. But psychopaths can also deceive the polygraph machine. The story shifts to some years later when we see a doctor performing surgery on a patient. His name is Sun Yo-han, and he is the son of Han Seo-jun, who was the headhunter and killed nearly 20 people previously. Han Seo-jun is currently living in prison as he was sentenced to life due to his crimes. Meanwhile, one of Han Seo-jun's victims has become a detective. His name is Muchi, and his parents were killed by Han Seo-jun earlier. Now, Muchi visits Seo-jun at the detention center. Muchi's trying to get thrown into jail so that he can kill Seo-jun, but the convict knows he can't do it. He wasn't born to be a killer, as his eyes are full of emotions. Seo-jun says that one can see emptiness clearly in the eyes of a killer. Undeterred, Muchi recites the Bible that anyone who takes the life of a human being is to be put to death. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The passage resonates with Muchi and inspires him to pay back what he received. The new plan is to kill Seo-jun in front of his son so that he suffers the same pain of witnessing such a scarring moment. Prison guard Na Chi-kook escorts Seo-jun back to solitary confinement. The convict asks for some surgical thread to practice with, but Chi-kook doesn't give in even when Seo-jun says that the other guards never went against his wishes. After some days, a church group set up a magic show for the inmates at the prison. During the show, the performance is well underway. The inmates aren't receptive to the magic show at first, but by the time Seo-jun shows up, everyone's laughing heartily. The final act is to handcuff a volunteer and lock him in the safe. They spin it around, claiming that the inmate will disappear. Everybody panics when they open the door to do their big reveal. Everyone is shocked to see Chi-kook stripped down to his underwear, bloody and unconscious inside the safe. He's been stabbed multiple times and lost a few fingers. The co-workers quickly take him to the hospital, where Dr. Sun Yo-han treats him. One of the co-workers, Officer Young Barium is with him. He is very worried about Natchikuk because he was close to him. He remains with Natchikuk all the time, taking care of him, but Natchikuk is unable to stand up because the injuries are severe, and he is in a coma now. Meanwhile, Muchi receives a call informing him about a recent murder in the greenhouse. Muchi quickly runs over to the greenhouse, where a young woman's body is found. The killer has wrapped a previous victim, Suho's boxing gloves, around this victim's neck. Also, he placed another victim's missing ring on her finger and made her wear the missing shoe of a homeless man who was killed earlier. The one thing Muchi doesn't recognize is Chikuk's watch, which is now on the wrist of this young woman. During the earlier examination, Muchi removes the woman's hand from her mouth. There, he saw that the murderer carved a cross on the roof of her mouth, and her middle finger was pointing at it. The detective discovers a bloody message written just for him when he looks up. In the message, the killer praises the detective and also says that it's a gift for the detective in the form of a dead body. Meanwhile, Professor Daniel has returned to Korea. He visits Ji-eun's house after all these years, and she warmly welcomes him, seeing a photo of Ji-eun with Surgeon Johan on the wall. Daniel asks if he's her son. She confirms that he is, then says she needs to head to work at her flower shop soon. Daniel asks what happened to the dog, so Ji-eun explains that her son brought the dog home injured and nursed it back to health because he can't stand seeing any living being suffer. As Daniel stands to leave, Ji-eun blurts out that he was wrong about her son and that he will become a killer as he has the psychopath gene. When Jae-hoon's family was murdered, Daniel Lee got a chance to speak to the police about the case. Jae-hoon had been considered a suspect but was ruled out because his polygraph test was clean. Though Daniel knew that a psychopath could easily beat a polygraph, the police were confident that an 11-year-old boy wouldn't murder his whole family. But Daniel hadn't looked so sure. After that, Daniel goes to the hospital and observes Sun Johan's behavior. He is trying to assess whether Sun Johan is a psychopathic killer or not. Through his actions, Professor Daniel seems somewhat convinced that Sun Johan is the killer. He calls Sun Johan and asks him to meet because he wants to talk about the recent murders. Later at night, Daniel shows up at an abandoned amusement park to wait in a Ferris wheel car for Sun Johan. When Sun Johan comes there, he turns on the power to the Ferris wheel. Then, Johan attacks Daniel and stabs him repeatedly. Later, we see him throwing a packed body into the lake. Meanwhile, Muchi and his team were still at the prison looking for Chikuk's uniform and the stabbing weapon. Barium brings up the fact that Chikuk wasn't supposed to point at a cross like the other victims, but neither of them can imagine what makes Chikuk different. On the drive back to the station, Barium mentions that this is his first time meeting Muchi, though he's heard of him from Muchi's elder brother, Moon. Later, Barium catches his girlfriend, Bang Yi, and they both go to a restaurant to have a meal together. Meanwhile, Muchi sees Dr. Sun Johan hugging a broadcasting anchor, Miss Choi. He has come to talk to Miss Choi about a recent murder, and he finds her hugging Johan, who looks terrified about something. Muchi remembers once when Miss Choi asked him out right next to a corpse at a murder scene, but he'd lied that she was not his type. Miss Choi seemed hurt and had told him that he'd regret it someday, and now it seems to be that day. After that, we see the grandmother of Bang Yi Halmoni called Bang Yi's school. She's in trouble for hitting another girl. Halmoni begs the girl's mother to forgive Bang Yi, but Bang Yi yells that the girl has spread rumors about her and Halmoni doesn't need to apologize on her behalf. She storms out saying this, and the student angrily blames her mother for saying nasty things about Bang Yi. Hearing all this, Halmoni yanks the student in her, both by the hair for spreading rumors about her grandchild. When she rejoins Bang Yi outside, Bang Yi can see that Halmoni is disheveled and lashes out in frustration. Bang Yi tearfully blames Halmoni for what happened to her years ago when her grandmother asked her to go out for some food. But Bang Yi ended up in a situation where she was attacked by a nasty killer. Then Bang Yi runs off, and Halmoni collapses in guilt-weighted tears. At home, she realizes that Bang Yi's behavior must be because the nasty killer, Kan Duk-soo, is getting out of prison soon. She unwraps a knife she keeps in the newspaper, saying ominously that she will take care of everything. Kan Duk-soo won't get to live even one day as a free man. Later, Barium goes to Halmoni, and Halmoni tells him about going to Bang Yi's school. He notices a childish ducky pin she's wearing, and Halmoni says that Bang Yi made it for her as a birthday gift years ago. Then we see that Bang Yi's classmate's mother has demanded a settlement payment for getting into a fight with her. So Halmoni goes out looking for a job. Coincidentally, the job that Halmoni swiped is a temporary house cleaning job at Johan's home. When Johan is not at home, she heads to the basement to clean and finds the door locked. but the key is still in the lock. When she opens the door, she is shocked by seeing pictures of all the victims on the wall. Halmoni stole a picture off his wall, one of the recent victims who was found with evidence from the other murders. Meanwhile, Johan is meeting with Mucci because Mucci thinks that Johan is a bit suspicious, but he still doesn't have any evidence against him. During their conversation, Johan suddenly remembers that he has left the keys of the basement in the lock, so he quickly gets up to go back home. But before leaving, Mucci makes him write the name of his friend, with whom he was hanging out on the day of the recent murder. It was because Mucci wanted to check his alibi. Then, son Johan races home, but Halmoni is back upstairs. She says she's finished and leaves, shaking and so terrified that she forgets her payment. Johan checks the basement door, which leads to the room that's wallpapered with photos he's taken of his murder victims. He sees that one of the pictures is missing and that Halmoni stole that picture. She plans to give it to Barium to help catch the killer, but she's unaware that the killer is following her home. Halmoni gets off the bus at Barium's building and tries to go inside, but it's locked. She hides from Johan when she finally sees him, but she panics and runs, and Johan spots her movement. Back at the station, Barium finally checks his phone, and there is a text from Halmoni saying that message. He starts running home at top speed. After reaching there, he calls her phone and follows the ringtone to a nearby alley, but unfortunately, Barium finds Halmoni's body lying in the alley. Johan has already killed her by stabbing a knife in her belly several times. Then Barium sees Johan lurking nearby. Seeing Barium, Johan starts to run, and Barium gives him a chase. Barium almost catches Johan several times, but Johan gets away when Barium is hit by a car while running across the street. Barium lies dazed, but he sees Johan's shoes in the crowd out of the corner of his eye. He can't quite see Johan's face clearly before the murderer turns and walks away. On the way to the crime scene, Mucci notices Banyi hunched over in the pouring rain and gives her a lift across the bridge. When they reach the crime scene, Banyi is worried about her grandmother as she cannot find her at home. Meanwhile, Mucci checks the face of the victim, and she is an old lady who Mucci knows from his past. He remembers her from the incident of her grandchild being abused by the Kondaksu. Then, Mucci immediately notices that Halmoni is gripping something tightly and pries it from her hand. It's a corner of the photo. She put out the fire with her hand to save it. When the body is carried out, Banyi is amongst the crowd. She can sense that something's wrong, but Mucci holds her back when her body gets wheeled out. With the exposed injured ankle and hairpin, it's undeniable that it's Halmoni. Mucci gently wipes the blood away from Halmoni's face before allowing Banyi to get a glimpse of her. Mucci restrains the tearful Banyi as she cries for her grandmother. Mucci goes to the hospital to gather intel from Barium, who's drained of energy and blames himself for not picking up Halmoni's calls. In her message, Halmoni told Barium to meet her at the general store because she had a photo to show him. Barium quickly went there in the rain, but the neighborhood was empty and the store was closed. He followed the sound of her ringtone and found her body. Barium chased the killer, but it was too dark to see his face. The only information Barium remembers is that he smelled mint from the killer, and also, the killer was left-handed. Meanwhile, Johan is at home, and he mists himself after showering. His mother also came there and took Johan's clothes to put them in the washing machine, but she is shocked to see that the clothes are blood-stained. When Johan comes out of the bathroom, he sees his mother cooking a meal for him. Avoiding eye contact, she mentions the bloody clothes and asks if there is an emergency patient on the way home from work, but she is actually making excuses so that Johan would not become uncomfortable. She also notes that he smells nice and figures that he has someone special in his life, hoping that he'll give her a grandchild soon. Later, on the drive home, Ji-eun turns on the radio and breaks down when she learns of the 2 murders that happened today. She pulls over when both cases are reported to be linked to the recent serial killings, and recalls how she once told her son that he was a monster and shouldn't have been born. Sobbing, Ji-eun wonders what she can do about these sins. Meanwhile, Johan heads to the hospital when he learns that Barium is getting treated for his injuries. Being a doctor, Johan walks into the room easily, even being guarded. Before he's able to inject the contents of a syringe into Barium's system, he hears a commotion outside and quickly hides himself. It's Banyi who storms into the room, blaming Barium for killing her grandmother as he did not pick up her calls. In the meantime, Johan slips out unnoticed, with 6 kills under the murderer's belt within a span of 2 months. The nation is gripped with fear and distrust towards the police, as they still have 0 leads. Mucci analyzes the corner of the photo retreated by Halmoni's dead body. He is certain that he's seen it somewhere before. To find out where Halmoni acquired the photo, Mucci tries to retrace her steps, and Barium also helps him. They make it to an old building and begin to ask every shopkeeper whether they've seen her, but don't have any luck. They miss the lady from the job dispatch center who recognizes Halmoni and is about to call in to report it. Halmoni went there on the day of her death and got a job at the house of Johan. However, the owner of the agency stops the lady from reporting because he is afraid that their practice of hiring illegal immigrants will be uncovered by the police. Meanwhile, a friend of Johan, Junsun, calls because the police contacted him, and Johan instructs him to say what he told him to say. Junsun meets with Detective Shin-sang and claims that he was at Johan's place on Sunday night because his friend wasn't feeling well. Actually, he is trying to prove Johan's alibi on his order. Shin-sang borrows his phone and calls Johan, who picks up and asks whether the cop has gone and if he told him what Johan asked him to do. Shin-sang hangs up and leaves with no further questions, and Junsun realizes what happened when Johan calls back. Shin-sang reports this to Mucci, who says that naturally, the next step is to break into Johan's car and find out where he really was by reviewing the black box footage. Later, we see the serial killer kill the brother of Mucci on the television in front of the whole public. This makes Mucci extremely angry and depressed. He has no one left but his brother, whom the psychopath has killed now brutally on a live show. And the reason behind this killing is that Mucci's brother has no anger against the killer, although the killer's father has already killed his parents in the past. But Mucci's father has forgiven the murderer of his parents as he thinks revenge is not good for the soul. Still, after the incident of his brother's death, Mucci continues his investigation into Halmoni's case and finds some drinks in his bag of granny. By seeing the labels on those drinks, Mucci reaches the store from which Halmoni got those drinks and asks the lady there about Bangi's grandmother. This time, that lady confesses that Halmoni came to her on that day, and she sent her to a home for the cleaning job. When Mucci gets the contact number of the person who hired Halmoni on that day, he goes straight to pay a visit to that person. It's actually Ji-eun, the old lady who hired a maid to clean her son's house. But Mucci remembers her from his past. She is the wife of Han Seo-jun, the headhunter who terrorized a nation by killing 20 people in the past. Mucci then checks the family details of Ji-eun and finds out that Johan is actually Ji-eun's son. Now, his suspicions about Johan have increased further, and he goes to check Johan's house for potential evidence. During the search, Mucci reaches the basement area and is about to break the lock on its door. Then, suddenly, he hears someone coming inside the house. It's Johan, who is back at home. So Mucci sneaks into the garage. While in there, Mucci finds a pair of bloody shoes in a box. He places them near Johan's trash and calls Shin, saying Mucci wants to use the shoes as evidence against Johan, but mulling them would make them inadmissible as evidence and they don't have search warrant. However, Mucci forcefully convinces him that a small white lie could save lives. Meanwhile, Barium goes to the prison, and Miss Choi is also there to find out if anyone could have sneaked in on the day that Ji-kook was attacked. The prison doctor in the infirmary tells them that Han Seo-jun faked chest pain on the day to ask if Johan was here the day Ji-kook was attacked. He also admits that Johan was there to see Seo-jun that day. This is the first that Hongju has heard Johan's name associated with this case, and she's stunned to realize that her boyfriend might be a murder suspect. Suddenly, she recalls how Johan seemed terrified that night as he held her. Then, she goes straight to Johan's house and marches straight to Johan's office to look for the bandage she threw away. She found the cartoon bandage on the day when Halmoni visited Johan's house and somehow forgot it back. Miss Choi also finds a bugging device in his trash can. In the meantime, Johan also comes behind her. She covers the matter by throwing her arms around him, and behind his back, she shoves the bandage into her sleeve. Mucci, who is standing outside Johan's house, has seen Miss Choi going into the house, and he is worried about her. So, he calls Miss Choi to tell him that they are going to search the house of the psychopath killer, and she should also come with them for an exclusive story. Johan also overhears this and starts putting something in his car, then leaves the house. A while later, Johan is driving when the car behind him speeds up and crashes into him. The driver insists on getting the police even though Johan just wants to go. Mucci is watching the whole scene from nearby, and it is all a setup to trap Johan. The other driver, who was actually the girlfriend of Detective Shin, saying, tells the cops that she heard a child's voice coming from Johan's bag, and since the child is still missing, the police order him to open the bag. Mucci sits in his car, gun pointed at Johan, ready to shoot him dead the moment that child is safe. However, the bag only holds clothes for a long shift at work, so Shinseng texts his girlfriend to say that the sound actually came from the trunk. Mucci braces himself again, but he's disappointed when Johan's trunk is empty aside from an emergency kit. Time is running out, so Shinseng follows Johan while Mucci moves on to Plan C, which is breaking into Johan's home and shooting the knob off the basement door. But there is nothing in the basement that can be taken as solid proof. And also, the missing child is not there. Johan has already removed everything from the basement. Meanwhile, Borium gets a call from the doctor that Halmoni's DNA was found on a bandage at Johan's house. He decides to go check it out himself and ends up in Johan's basement. He finds the wall of photos, but Johan is not there. Seeming to know that someone is there, he steals a delivery scooter and takes off just as the cops arrive. On the other hand, Baini wakes up and hears Johan breaking into Barium's house. She calls Mucci, who drunkenly answers, and Baini whispers that the killer is here right now. Johan follows Baini when she slips outside and tries to find Barium. Thankfully, Barium finds Baini first and helps her get away, but he goes back to catch Johan and ends up cornered by Johan on the roof. Outside the house, Baini finds Mucci and wails that Borium is in danger. They arrive at the building just in time to see Johan bashing Borium in the head with a hammer over and over and over. Acting on impulse, Mucci shoots Johan, who falls next to Borium, and the two lie there, bleeding out. They're rushed to the hospital, and sometime later, Borium wakes up alone, his head heavily bandaged. Baini has left her bird's cage in the room with him, where she chirps happily in the morning sun. Borium slowly gets out of bed, takes the bird from its cage, and snaps its neck with his left hand. He tosses the tiny body out his hospital window, goes back to bed, and sighs contentedly that finally, it's quiet. After the grave incident, Borium lost his memory, and he couldn't even recognize Baini. He just remembers daily life things and has lost all other memories of people around him. On the other hand, Johan is announced dead due to the septic shock. His mother is weeping on his dead body as he is the only one left behind in her family. Meanwhile, Mucci is brought in front of the disciplinary committee for shooting a person without warrants, although he confesses all his non-professional actions to killing a psychopath. Still, the committee clears him of misconduct because he saved Borium, and Mucci receives 1 year of probation with a 6-month salary cut. Mucci approaches the committee and argues that he should be sent to jail for killing someone. Actually, he always dreamt of killing a psychopath and then going inside the prison to kill Han Seo-jun, who killed his whole family. After some days, Mucci is back at the duty and Borium has also recovered and appointed as a prison guard. He has gained a lot of popularity due to standing in front of the psychopath killer alone, and he is being called as Nation's son. Although he looks fine, the incident has changed something inside him. He is better at his job than earlier, and now he thinks exactly like the serial killer and helps Mucci in all the cases. One day, when he is chasing a thief, he finds a dead body hidden below a bridge. Everyone is surprised by seeing the detective skills of Borium there. He is acting like he knows the serial killer very well, as if he has read a lot of books on psychopaths. But this is not the case. He has not even read a single book and has no prior experience of working on such events. Borium explains that all these detective feelings just come from inside of him. Also, Borium is having flashbacks of his previous memories, and this also makes his head pain a lot. So, he goes to see his surgeon. The surgeon explains that Borium's surgery was not an easy task and that after such complex surgeries, headaches are normal. He also hands over some painkillers and tells him not to worry about it. When Borium comes out of the doctor's room, Bonnie is waiting for her. She tells him that this doctor was not the actual surgeon who performed the surgery on Borium when he was injured. This revelation makes Borium confused, so he again goes inside and asks the doctor if he was the actual doctor who performed surgery on him. The doctor tells him confidently that he is the one who performed the surgery. Still, Borium feels that the doctor is lying to him. So, he checks the list of doctors with Bonnie to identify the actual surgeon, but that surgeon is not in the list. Bonnie mentions that Borium's surgeon had a scar on his right. Borium knows only one doctor who has a scar on his face, and he is Han Seo-jun, the great neurosurgeon of his time, but he is in prison, so how can he perform the surgery of Borium? To confirm his theory, Borium sends the picture of Han Seo-jun to Bonnie and asks if he is the one. To that, Bonnie replies in positive. After that, Borium goes to the prison to ask Han Seo-jun what he did to him during those surgeries. Han Seo-jun tells the story of that day when Borium was injured badly. He was taken to the hospital in a pretty bad condition along with Johan. As Borium had become very popular at that time, the public wanted him to come back alive from the ICU. All the pressure was on the secretary of the president, so she requested Han Seo-jun to perform brain transplant surgery. As the secretary got a tape recording earlier, Han Seo-jun could be seen performing brain transplant surgeries on test objects like mice. He was also quite successful in performing those surgeries and had also discovered a way to conquer tissue transplant rejection. Actually, Han Seo-jun killed all those people during his tenure to test his new inventions on the brains of humans. Muchi's family was the last one he planned to kill because his surgery was successful in the testing phase, but he ended up in prison due to Muchi, and his surgery also came to a halt. And now Borium wants brain transplant surgery because his head is completely crushed by the attacks of Johan. So, at the request of the secretary, Han Seo-jun transplanted a part of Johan's brain into the brain of Borium. It is also revealed that Johan did not die due to septic shock, but of this brain transplant surgery. Also, Han Seo-jun killed him. In other words, now, Borium seems very agitated by knowing all these facts, and he is having flashbacks of Johan's memories. Also, his nature is becoming much like Johan's. One night, a drunken Muchi comes to Borium's house and blames him for catching the killer, which adds to Borium's annoyance. When Muchi punches him, Borium wraps his fingers around his neck and squeezes until Muchi turns purple. He grabs an object nearby and strikes the detective repeatedly, blood splattering onto his smiling face. But later, we see that it's Borium's own hand on which he was striking and not on Muchi's face. Muchi wakes up in the morning after his confrontation with Borium, who is still at Borium's house. He has no memory of their fight and has strangulation marks around his neck. He also notices that Borium's left hand is wrapped as if he's injured. Borium admits that he and Muchi fought, but he downplays what happened. Then, Borium again goes to meet Han Seo-jun. He wants to know why he is becoming more and more violent day by day. Han Seo-jun tells him that in his experiments, every time when he transplanted the brain of a violent mouse into the head of a silent mouse, the recipient became violent within days. So, the reason for the violent behavior of Borium is that he has the brain of Johan in his head now. One day, Borium goes to the doctor who pretended to be a surgeon earlier. Borium asks him for the video of his surgery, but the doctor claims that he has no video because the surgery was performed in secrecy, and to avoid any public reaction, they did not make the video. Borium is going out of control day by day. He has started attacking his close ones as his nature as a psychopath killer is pushing him to kill someone. Borium even attacks the doctor for not getting the answer he wanted from him. After some time, a new murder is reported at the police station, and Borium also goes to the crime scene for an initial examination. First, it is speculated that this case is a self-harm act, but Borium, using his psychopathic killer mind, proves that it's a murder. When he examines the body, he finds the locket of Muchi's brother around her neck. This makes him remember a memory of when he killed Muchi's brother, and she is now wearing the same locket. Then he sees a brooch of Halmoni on that dead body, and it also reminds him of the memory of Halmoni's murder. But he thinks that these memories are Johan's, and he should avoid them. Seeing the belongings of the other victims with the present murder victim, Borium claims that the killer is the same one they have seen earlier, but it can't be possible because Johan is dead now. The second theory is that the killer is a copycat of Johan. This theory makes some sense, so he starts investigating this matter himself. One day, when Borium is with a fellow detective going to a wedding ceremony, they see that the door of the bride is locked. There is a killer inside the room who binds the hands of the bride and then kills him. Borium, using his sharp mind, opens the door with a trick and enters the room, but it's too late now. The killer has already done his job, and now he attacks Borium from behind. But Borium overcomes him in no time and starts punching his head brutally, but suddenly, he stops thinking that he is doing wrong. The killer gets the opportunity and runs off from his hands. Outside, the killer crashes his car into Borium, who is chasing him, and in the end, the killer himself gets into the accident. Later, the chase takes them both to an abandoned place where the killer hits the head of Borium with some heavy object, making him unconscious. When Borium wakes up, his hands are tied with a rope. He identifies the killer as someone related to his past because he remembers the pattern of that particular knot around his hands. When the killer approaches Borium to kill him, Borium has already untied his hands, and he overpowers the killer quickly. He punches his head again and again. In his rage against that killer, Borium actually kills him, and in this process, he remembers all of his previous killings. All those murders were committed by Borium and not Johan. He is identifying himself as the actual killer now. So he goes straight to the police station and announces that he is the killer and he recently committed a murder. When the police, along with the forensic team, come to analyze the crime scene, they find nothing there. Everything is placed in its proper place, and there is not even a single sign of murder present there. The forensic doctor tells Mucci that Borium may be having hallucinations after the brain surgery, so they also leave the place. Later, when Borium mentions the locker and brooch found on the dead body of a recent victim, he learns that he was also wrong about them. His fellow workers tell him that there was no locket or brooch present on that dead body, and it was also a hallucination of Borium. After some days, when Borium again goes to the place where he committed the murder, he sees that there is indeed a spot of fire burn present there, and this was from the night when he fought with the killer. So, he was not hallucinating, but someone was there who was hiding all the crimes of Borium. When Borium is present at the hospital for some work, he receives a call on the phone in his pocket. Surprisingly, the phone is not Borium's, and he remembers that an old man fell on him earlier when he was exiting a bus. So that old man must have exchanged the phones. When he attends the call, the person on the other side asks Borium to meet him because he can give all the answers to the questions of Borium. He agrees and goes to an abandoned place to meet him. Suddenly, someone comes from behind him and makes Borium unconscious with anesthesia. He takes him to an old, worn-out secret storage house where that old man tells the story of Borium. He has been tracking Borium from his childhood and reveals that Borium's actual name was Jae-hoon, and he was born with the psychopath gene. He also says that all those murders for which Johan was convicted were actually committed by Borium, the old grandmother of Bang-yi, the brother of Mucci, the poor little kid, and everyone else on the list of serial killings were killed by Borium. He used to show himself as an innocent person, but deep inside, he was a serial killer who murdered poor people for no reason. He also had a secret basement under his house where he used to keep the dead bodies of his victims. Borium can feel that the old man is talking right because he remembers all those memories of his childhood when his mother tried to kill him, saying that he was a monster. It's not the memories of Johan, but Borium's own memories. Johan also had the psychopath gene in him, but he didn't turn into a monster. He had come to know about Borium's death and was researching all the victims killed by Borium. He wanted to stop Borium on the day when he came to his house, but he was shot by Mucci on the spot and didn't even get a chance to explain himself. After the surgery, Borium forgot everything that he was a serial killer earlier. And when he got the brain of Johan in his head, he started getting feelings of guilt that were not in his head before. It was Johan's brain that made him feel that he was a good person and not a psychopath. So, now, Borium writes a death note acknowledging all his crimes and is going to commit the unthinkable because the weight of his sins is too heavy that he can't bear it now. But he is not the only one guilty of all these serial killings. He and Johan were always monitored by the secretary of the president. She has been covering the sins of Borium yet. When Borium turns himself in prison, he tells everything to the police. Mucci is deeply saddened and angered at Borium. He could not even imagine that Borium could be a serial killer. Then, Borium tells Mucci that the secretary had planned to pass the psychopath gene bill in the parliament. According to that bill, all the fetuses with the psychopath gene would be discarded throughout the nation, but the majority of people rejected that bill. So, the secretary let Borium kill people and even covered his traces from the crime scene. She wanted to present Borium as a brutal killer in front of the public to highlight the importance of discarding psychopath gene fetuses. That's why she let him kill more and more people. So, now the secretary has also been arrested and is being investigated thoroughly. Borium is sentenced to remain in prison for the rest of his life. After some days in prison, Borium goes to meet Han Seo-jun, who reveals that Borium is actually his son. When he was born, Ji-eun shuffled her baby with another mom so that the other mom could kill the baby if he showed signs of being a psychopath. Also, Han Seo-jun performed that surgery because he was making his own son live and letting Johan die. It seems like Borium is not happy listening to all these new secrets of his past. He hugs his father and then kills him with a pointed object in his hand. He has completed his job now. Although he can't be pardoned for his sins, he did the right thing in the end. We see that Mucci comes to visit Borium sometimes because Borium is soon going to be dead. He has been experiencing the after effects of the surgery, and he has no more days left to live. On the other hand, Bonnie happily lives with Moochie, and Moochie is now her guardian and friend too.